Zoom yet?
No, it
Not supposed to.
doesn't count.
Yeah,
You have to
Really?
be here in
Yeah.
person
Yeah.
if you're on the committee, yeah.
but it's just at 6 o'clock, so maybe in a few minutes.
It's like, the real feel for time.
Yeah.
The hotter it gets.
And do we expect to see members of the chocolate today? We'll find out.
It's too hot.
Yeah. They're going home now.
Should I start just to let attendees in?
Yeah,
So would you get them?
I think we only need one more, right? Oh, we have more people now. What's,
Oh my God. We have 16 people, so we need 9.
I only got 3 no's, so. I think people are just running late.
Alice told me she was going to come. I got a text from her.
Mhm.
I don't know about her and Nancy. He is taking some.
Good. Pushed out the, ancient history.
Thanks to you for sending me. I've sent. Super.
Yeah. Sure. Maybe we can get started in a couple of minutes and then people
Yeah.
show up and show
We
up.
only need quorum to vote.
Yeah, exactly.
Before we start, just a question. Can your computer pick up my voice or should I have my microphone on?
No, you should be muted
Okay,
and it's actually better if your video is off.
Okay.
Just because we see you in the room.
Perfect.
On the screen. Thank you.
Oh, well, I don't know.
Do you wanna,
Not sure what they're gonna
here,
do.
here, sit on the couch?
Marissa, are you gonna do a different color for the walls after the renovation?
It's gonna be different, not even this.
But not for a year.
Not for a year? It's been a year to renovate. Where are we gonna meet?
Another conversation.
Right, we will get started, yeah. All right, we'll get going and people will come in. Are we good to go? Okay. Hi, this is the June 23rd meeting of the Manhattan Community Board 5 Transportation Committee. I'm David Sigmund, Chair, joined by Samir Lavingia, Vice Chair. Any items voted on at this meeting will appear at the full CB5 board meeting on Thursday, July 10th. We have one item on the public agenda today, a presentation from NYC EDC on the proposed Fifth Avenue redesign, the future of Fifth. And after the public agenda, we'll hold an orientation and review of topics and teams for the committee for the coming year. If we could just go around the room for committee members.
Kieran Patel, new member. Zool Zolkowitz, welcome.
Athena's house.
Samir Lavingia. Vice Chair.
Charles Baker, new member. Nice to meet you all.
Do we have anybody,
Yeah, online.
nobody online? Okay. So we won't be able to vote till we get a quorum. Do we have members of the public on? Okay. Before we jump into the agenda, are there any members of the public or of the committee that have new business they'd like to raise? We do this first so that members of the public don't have to wait through all of the agenda items if they're here to raise a new topic. So just raise your hand if you have a new business item. Charles? You can go ahead, Charles.
Yes, I, can you hear me okay? I would like to know, if the committee could look into the use of NYPD boulders. There's been some NYPD boulders that have been stuck, on, Madison Square Park at all four corners and, on adjacent blocks for quite an amount of weeks now. Even before June 14th, when the No King riots were happening, I thought they were maybe in preparations for that. I'm assuming and speculating that maybe it's in preparation for the LGBTQ parade on June 29th. I'm just wondering why they have been just out there, left outside, narrowing the sidewalks kind of in the way. And now pedestrians are using them for all different things, such as leaving plates of food on the boulders or parking e-bikes in between the boulders, and it's become a bit of a hazard to pedestrians. So I'm just wondering if there's anything you, the committee could look into. Thank you.
Yeah, so Charles and everyone, those have been put out because NYPD, in connection with a number of other agencies, the department is doing a study for security purposes, so that yes, they were out for No Kings, they will be out for Pride, but they will eventually go away and they will be replaced probably with bollards of various kinds. So it is an ongoing project.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Charles. Okay, if there's nobody else, we'll jump into the agenda. I'm sorry, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm Kelly. Sorry for coming late. I will make sure to be on time in the future.
Our presenters will walk us through their package. Then members of the committee can ask questions or make comments. After that, we'll take comments from the public. There is no time limit on comments, but we do ask that you keep things succinct and avoid repetition. After all public comment has been received, we'll enter the committee business session where only committee members will discuss the matter with no further input from the applicant or public unless requested by the chair. Finally, if appropriate, we'll craft a motion and take a vote. And after our last agenda item, the committee meeting, then we'll adjourn the meeting. Okay. Take it away. Do you want to introduce all of yourselves?
You heard of it?
There should still be time left in the meeting, yeah.
So I'm Alexis Taylor, EDC, and I'll just broadly introduce kind of everyone that's represented today, and then if someone's speaking. So you have members of the EDC team. We are project managing this project on behalf of City Hall. It's jointly sponsored by City Hall, EDC, DOT, and Parks. You also have DOT represented today. And then from City Hall, we have Gauteng Blue.
Great.
We are supported by, we competitively selected a consultant team that's led by Arcadis. And they're supported by TY Lin, which is formerly Sam Schwartz. I believe we have a slide on this, but field operations and public works partners. So the various consultants representing those teams are here today. And we also have a steering committee that represents both the city and the bids. So 34th, or sorry, Bryant Park Corporation, Fifth Avenue Association, Central Park Conservancy, and Grand Central Partnership are all in their steering. And the co-chairs of that are Madeline Wills on behalf of Fifth Avenue Association and Yating on behalf of City Hall. So I'll invite them to do some opening words on behalf of the project and then.
Yeah, just to say, hi, it's so great to meet in person. We brought the whole entire project team to
Yeah.
this committee meeting. Hope you guys enjoy our entourage here today. But we're so excited. I think as the Chief Public Realm Officer for the City of New York, it's just been an absolute like privilege to be part of this incredible brain trust and broader coalition, including all of the bids, and having a partner like Madeline Will, the Fifth Avenue Association, to make this project happen. It's been really exciting. The city is all in on this, making this big project happen. We put in $400 million capital dollars, to make this, to advance this project. We will hear very shortly from the project team in terms of where we are and what's next. And so my job here is to just continue to be part of this kind of cheerleading squad, to help support our agencies, to be good partners with our bids. That is part of the effort as well. So really excited to be here, and thank you. And I'll turn over to my partner in crime, my co-chair, Madeline Wills.
Hi, everyone. Madeline Wills, I'm the CEO of Fifth Avenue Association. I'm formerly the president of Hudson River Park Trust. I have 20-odd years of public realm works in all 5 boroughs. It's a passion for me. Parks are a passion for me. Greenery is a passion for me. Pedestrians are a passion for me. And I was brought on to this project for this idea. It was very apparent to me after I spoke to people who live there, the businesses there, the property owners, that the least loved transportation mode on Fifth Avenue and the largest transportation mode on Fifth Avenue were pedestrians. By far, hands down, nothing close. And yet pedestrians have been more crowded, more obstructions on the street, put into smaller, tighter spaces, unhappy. Clearly, Fifth Avenue did not look the way that people anticipated when they come to New York. Well, Fifth Avenue should look. We did lots of public surveys, which you'll hear about. People are disappointed after they come. People, New Yorkers no longer really want to come. And we want to change the tide of that because Fifth Avenue is one of the most important streets in the world. It is, and we shouldn't give up on it. And we should do what other cities are doing, which you'll see, which is enhancing their greatest streets in their cities. And that enhances people wanting to be there. And it's good for business and makes more taxes and all that stuff. So it's a fairly simple conflict in a very complicated world of transportation. But it was one that I felt strongly about. And you know, my passion for the city. I was the former chair of Community Board 1, Manhattan, Community Board 18 years,
So there's a future after community boards.
yeah, there was- of course, I had to live through 9/11 together.
Yeah.
Wasn't I wouldn't want to put that on my resume for you, but
So this hope, David.
yeah. But anyway, so you know, and then the more that we dig into this, the more, you know, we realize as we go on is that, you know, Fifth Avenue needs a lot of work. Needs a lot of work above it, and it also needs a ton of work below it. We have some of the oldest infrastructure in the city. Our water mains are over 150 years old. Our steam pipes are old, our sewers are old. Everything is old. There's a lot of abandoned stuff under there, and we need to figure it out. So that way, you know, Isabel's gonna talk about it later, but we're making like a really interesting early push with all the utility companies come together on this, figure this out early. So that we don't have to see a future of tearing it up over and over and over again. So, I think I said enough of that, did I miss anything? So some of the, like, important parts is, we've now completed schematic design. EDC will be, sending out an RFP in July, for, a team to continue the work through construction documents, and then, probably also construction administration, bring on a construction manager, probably early 6. And we'll continue to develop the plans and, continue to meet with you as we go along. But this is a very exciting project for New York, and, hopefully for your committee work. And I will introduce Isabel from Field Operations, Field Operations, I've had the pleasure of working, with. Trustee Lily Park, and they do fabulous work, which you probably know. Highline and all that, that's a work you can see. And Isabel will take it away.
Great, thank you, Madeline, and thank you all for having all of us here today, very intimate group. I'm gonna walk you through the design, but before I do wanna put together some project context and research so that you get a good feel for what we studied and what led to the design that you're about to see. Overall, the project that we're speaking about is the renovation of Fifth Avenue from 40th Street to 60th Street, which we like to think about as a project that is connecting park to park, Bryant Park and Central Park, as one boulevard that we hope can be green and sustainable, as well as iconic and pedestrian forward, as Madeline described. And this whole project really came to be as a result of the Making New York for Everyone action plan, or the new New York panel. There was an interest to revitalize Midtown after COVID. And in doing so, there was obviously an interest that to revitalize economics, to revitalize retail, you really need to look at public space. How can public space become a catalyst for a lot more investment, and also to bring people back in a space that's a lot more comfortable than perhaps the plain sidewalks that we see today. So as part of the new New York panel, there was a proposal to make Fifth Avenue from Bryant Park to Central Park into a vibrant corridor for pedestrians by expanding sidewalks, improving lighting, and adding more seating. And out of that initiative is what formed the Future of Fifth public-private partnership, which is all of us here, which, as Alexis mentioned, is a mix between city agencies and the 4 bids that oversee the area to ensure that we're doing a project that balances everybody's wishes and desires while still addressing some of the corridor's key concerns. So, as Madeline mentioned, our first and foremost goal is to prioritize pedestrians. And that is because of the metrics that we see here on the screen. Fifth Avenue's pedestrian volume is in par with the busiest places in the city and around the world. On a given day, during 1 hour, on one block, we can see over 5,000 pedestrians. That is obviously the image that we see here represented, that is all very familiar to all of us. But in the holiday season, that increases to 12,000 people per hour per block. And on the weekends, on holiday weekends, 23,000 people per hour per block. That is more than Madison Square. You see people exiting Madison Square Garden during a basketball game. Baseball game. That would be very difficult. But that's the point, right? We are seeing just so much foot traffic that we need to do something about. The other issue is that this is what the image of Fifth Avenue is today to many people that visit New York. They're looking for all of that iconic space, but what they really see is a roadway that's extremely congested and sidewalks are extremely congested. To find a solution to this problem, though, we knew we had to be very careful about understanding how Fifth Avenue operates today to ensure that anything we do only makes it better, doesn't detrimentally impact Fifth Avenue or other areas around. So we took a close look at transit. And one of the things that we found is that Fifth Avenue, if we look at this graph on the red, basically is the avenue on Manhattan that holds the largest amount of buses. It is effectively a primary bus corridor, both for express buses and local routes. It serves 7 local routes and 14 express routes. Sorry, 34. My numbers are getting all mixed up, I'm sorry. Out of those express buses though, within the study area between 40th and 60th, those buses are seeing only 10% occupancy. So what we do know is that a lot of buses are passing through. The local ones are the ones that are really picking up and delivering people. And that's something we've learned a lot through engaging with people that work on Fifth Avenue, that there's an imbalance there. So part of the design is to ensure that we do have effective public transportation, but we're also hoping to work with MTA in parallel to see if there's a way to balance this a little bit more so that everything works more efficient. In addition to buses, we also took a very close look at traffic, and we know this is also a really important issue. Fifth Avenue today has 3 travel lanes heading south, but effectively 2 of those are completely stop and go traffic because vehicles park along the eastern side of Fifth Avenue to deliver pickup or to pick up and drop off passengers. Technically, that's not permitted. All storefronts do have loading zones on the side streets. So effectively, what's happening today is that people are using those 2 lanes for activities that shouldn't happen on Fifth Avenue, and we really only have 1 lane consistently moving throughout. The other thing we found out of our studies is that 20% of the cars on Fifth Avenue are only passing through. They're really not local cars, which also gives us some hints about, how do we optimize the space and the different modes of transportation. In addition to that, we also wanted to know what people felt about Fifth Avenue. So between November 2023 and January 2024, we did a survey. We did a survey that both included on-foot survey as well as online survey. And we surveyed over 7,500 people. And we have the whole survey available, but there were some really interesting things that we found out. Out of people that shop on Fifth Avenue, 92% of the people that responded actually have shopped on the avenue, but only 27% said it's their favorite shopping district. So clearly there's an issue about making the space feel a lot more welcoming to everyone. When we asked them why, these were the words they described. It's full, it's busy, it's crowded, it's chaotic, overcrowded. The word chaos came over and over again. So obviously, there's some work we had to do here to ameliorate some of these descriptions. We asked people what would make their experience better. And by far, they responded wider sidewalks for easier movement out of online survey responders, which are the lighter green. 66% said wider sidewalks, and closely following were more trees and greenery along the avenue and more seating options. So again, following a lot of this, we took a look back and we established a series of purpose and goals for the renovation of Fifth Avenue. Taking into account how important it is for the city at large. It's not just a shopping destination, it's not just a tourist attraction. Fifth Avenue in 2022 generated $3.9 billion in taxable sales, out of which 3.5 gets directed to the city and 10% gets directed to the borough to do many other public improvements and support many other programs that we all benefit from. So it's not only a space that we want to create, make beautiful, it's a space we want to continue thriving as an economic engine that impacts the city at large. So we established a series of goals to create an innovative pedestrian-focused boulevard. Primary, most important focus is to ensure pedestrians have a safe place to walk. To support it as an economic engine, we all know metrics that when you invest in public space, as Madeline was mentioning, it boosts the economy and in turn boosts other benefits to the city at large. We want to prioritize accessibility and pedestrian mobility, ensure the corridor is forward thinking. And we also want to create additional public realm improvements, include seating, trees, plantings, create a sense of placemaking that doesn't really exist today. We also want to green the corridor. It's really important that as we think about the city, a street for the future, that we include vegetation that's sensible and sustainable, that can reduce heat gain and can also manage stormwater, minimizing a lot of the challenges that we see today in Midtown. So as we set out to do our work, taking into consideration everything we observed, everything we've heard from the general public, we started looking at streets around the world, as Madeline mentioned. We have streets like Champs-Élysées and Paseo de Gracia in Barcelona, which are kind of our golden star standard of beautiful tree-lined boulevards, are iconic and very pedestrian friendly. But we also started finding that a lot of older retail streets around the world have been started to get renovated. And in doing so, started adding more greenery, more planting, reducing cars, enlarging sidewalks, and therefore seeing a big boost in the economy. These include Calle Serrano in Madrid, Regent Street in London, which actually did it in a more temporary way, and now they're actually doing a permanent implementation. Roppongi Hills in Tokyo and Sloane Street in London, which actually just opened a couple of months ago. So we have proof that investing in this kind of space is really important for the city at large and for the economy. Another thing we found out as we started looking into this is that Fifth Avenue originally actually had wider sidewalks. Fifth Avenue was originally built with 30-foot wide sidewalks. Today they're 23 feet wide. And in the early 1900s, the sidewalks were reduced to be able to add 2 new vehicular lanes. And I love this quote from the New York Times because it says, an additional width of 15 feet to provide space for 2 more lanes of vehicles, New York's greatest driveway. So it gives you a sense, again, Fifth Avenue was intended to be this iconic boulevard that somehow got eroded to make ways for vehicles. And as we find ourselves in this century, we want to revert some of that, and we want to bring space back for pedestrians. So looking at the actual proposal with all of that background in mind, this is the existing layout for Fifth Avenue. Just as a reminder, I know you're all extremely familiar with it. So on the left-hand side, this would be the west side of the street. We have 2 bus lanes. The one along the curb picks up and drops off passengers. The one in the center is an express bus lane. And then we have 3 vehicular lanes. As a reminder, the ones on the far right or the east are the kind of more stop and go traffic. The roadway is 54 feet wide and each sidewalk is 23 feet. But the reality is that because those sidewalks hold bus stops and light poles and trash cans and mailboxes and other things, the effective clear space for pedestrian is only 15 feet wide, which is very, very small for the amount of pedestrians we see today. So in addition to counting pedestrians, as I mentioned before, we also decided to count everybody else using Fifth Avenue, just to understand how can we rebalance the modes of travel. However, we found out that by far pedestrians occupy the majority of the space. We have over 5,000 pedestrians per block per hour, represented here in these blue dots. For drama, we're putting them all on one side of the street. And then we have local bus riders, 674, express bus riders, 997, cyclists, taxi passengers, and private cars or full highway vehicles. So overall, when you look at this proportionally, even though the majority of users, 68% are pedestrians, they're only occupying 46% of this. So obviously, we need to reallocate space to appropriately accommodate this level of users. So the proposal, after a lot of testing, this didn't come very easily. The current proposal is to reduce the roadway to 33 feet and to enlarge the sidewalks by 10.5 feet each. That would make them a total of 33.5 feet. The roadway will have a curb lane along the west side. This works exactly as it does today. Either buses pull on that lane to be able to pick up and drop off passengers, or cars making a right-hand turn use that lane, and that will remain the same. We then have a dedicated bus lane in the middle. This is to allow for the free flow of buses, but also for those express buses to not see impacts into their service. And then on the eastern side, we will have 1 travel lane for ongoing traffic. All of those issues that we see today of pick up, drop off, deliveries, all of that would happen on the side streets on designated spaces, which I'll point out on the plans. What this allows us to do is to enlarge the sidewalk significantly by creating the 33.5 foot wide sidewalks. Now you'll notice on this image how we are also splitting the sidewalk into two portions. We're designating a 25-foot wide clear path along store windows. This is where we see the majority of the pedestrian congestion. Stop and go, people coming in and out of storefronts, people lining up in front of storefronts to get in. So we want to provide as ample space as possible. But we also know that a lot of us New Yorkers sometimes do get a little bit anxious when we're walking behind slow movers. And we're creating an alternative path along the curb line. This area will allow you to skip by, but it also will hold planting, greenery, benches to also create a sense of space. In between those two areas is where we're locating the street trees. The idea with this is that we're not only greening the corridor, but that shade cast by the street trees is most benefited by those walking along the sidewalk. So this is the configuration that we are pursuing at the moment. Now, to keep in mind, the renovation of Fifth Avenue and this proposal to prioritize pedestrians and reduce the roadway comes along part of a larger effort by the city at large to support multimodal mobility across Manhattan. And over here, we have the list of all of the different projects that are emerging at the same time to either prioritize public transportation or pedestrians, pedestrianized streets, and again, ensure a much more multimodal city. And DOT is here to speak to those at large in the context of Fifth Avenue. But we do want to point out that we are one of many initiatives occurring throughout the city. Now, this is not all about practical ideas and metrics and counts. We also want the space to be beautiful and we want it to be iconic and recognizable. And as we set out to develop the design, one important thing for us was to really understand the architecture of Fifth Avenue and think about a streetscape design that felt really unique to the place. We started by looking at all of the many buildings on Fifth Avenue. We have a large amount of historic buildings and landmark buildings. We also have a wide array of architectural styles and different materials and different periods. However, one thing that became prevalent to all of us is that what really calls your attention the most about Fifth Avenue today is uniform materiality. We see a lot of paving that has blue-gray tones, mostly granite or the concrete sidewalks. We see a lot of beautiful Art Deco buildings with Art Deco architecture, motifs, also bronze gold materiality. So as I'm about to present to you the proposed designs, the idea is that they're truly grounded in some of that iconic architecture. So again, we're not doing a project that's practical to alleviate some of the challenges, but one that's also looking to the future as creating an iconic boulevard for New York City. So to start talking about the design, this is our key plan or 20-block vision plan for Fifth Avenue. Again, we're starting at the southernmost edge on 40th Street and extending the renovation to 60th Street. And what we recognize out of this project is that we want to create a uniform streetscape. We want to create a space that all feels contiguous, but there's also very unique areas along Fifth Avenue that we also want to highlight with the design. So we developed this idea of categorizing the spaces between connectors, piazzas, and gateways. What connectors mean are the majority of those blocks that today are characterized by retail. These are mostly 42nd Street to 49th and 51st to 58th. They're extremely important for the livelihood of Fifth Avenue, but you cross them quite quickly. They don't feel like a sense of place. They're needing something to anchor them. Then we have spaces that are a little bit more iconic. Let's call them more attractors. This is what we call the piazzas. These are the spaces in front of the New York Public Library, Rockefeller Center and St. Pat's, and Grand Army Plaza leading to Central Park. And you know, when you walk on Fifth Avenue, the spaces feel different. The buildings are quite iconic. They're lower. You feel more sunlight. They do hold quite a variety of public events. So we want to treat the streetscape a little bit differently there so that, again, we recognize these unique moments of pause along the avenue. And then we have the gateways. One of the key things about Fifth Avenue is that a lot of people arrive from the east and west. And what we've heard from a lot of stakeholders is that it's very difficult to cross the street, both north-south and east-west, because of the traffic, because of the width. So we are creating a series of traffic calming techniques that will make crossing Fifth Avenue north-south more easily. But these particular gateways that you see here are moments where we do have a lot of public transportation basically coming onto Fifth Avenue. Either crosstown buses or access to subways. We're creating unique interventions here again to prioritize pedestrians and create easier access to the space. So looking at what that looks like, this is our bird's eye view to show you what the future could look like on Fifth Avenue. This is a typical block. So to walk you through it, if you follow my cursor, in lighter gray would be that clear pedestrian path along storefronts. Again, this is an area that will have no obstacles, no trash cans, light poles, mailboxes, anything that would impede that pedestrian traffic. It's intended to accommodate that amount of flow that I mentioned originally. In darker gray over here, if you follow my cursor, this is our furniture zone and alternative pedestrian path. And in these areas where we're accommodating all of those streetscape elements that will not only make Fifth Avenue iconic and give it a sense of place, but would also make it a lot more pleasant to use today. On the corners of the block, we are proposing what we call semi-raised planters. These are 12-inch high planters that will contain trees. They will contain perennial planting for greenery and seasonal interest, and also public seating on either end, so that people are either sitting facing outboard to the intersection, should they be waiting for someone to pick them up, or inboard looking at the street life, or even serving as benches for bus stops. In the center of the block, we're keeping it quite open to ensure clear visibility across with trees on tree grades. On the west-hand side of the street, which is the top on the image, that center area will hold all of the bus stops. And on the east side, we're able to carve out opportunities for other activation, whether it is seasonal planting, artwork, or other elements that will activate the street. On either side, you'll notice how the corners are now bulb outs. The idea here is that we're able to basically bump out the sidewalk to reduce the crosswalk length. We're also raising the crosswalks to be at the same level as the sidewalk to facilitate mobility throughout. We're lining the corners with bollards to ensure we have safety on those corners where most people gather. And then the rest basically allowing the streetscape elements to provide that sense of protection while beautifying the street and not creating more clutter to impact pedestrian traffic. You'll also notice how on the top of the image, where we see the taxi cabs, we're working with DOT to create designated pickup and drop-off areas on the side streets. So again, learning from some of our retailers that have told us this is where people usually get on and off. We're creating official spaces to, again, ensure traffic flow on Fifth Avenue is effective and people can safely access the area. This is a plan view of what I just explained. So to quickly orient ourselves, we have in lighter gray that clear path. The planters under number 3, lining the corners, also creating a sense of greenery and flowers as you move through crosstown and access Fifth Avenue. The center of the block a little bit more open with trees on tree grades. Bus stops in the center of the block, stopping along the westernmost travel lane, which also serves as a right-hand turning lane. Your middle dedicated bus lane and your eastern travel lane that also serves as a left turn lane. And here we see the configuration of those corners, bumping out the sidewalk so that we can shorten the crosswalk and also create pick-up and drop-off areas on the side streets. Looking at an image of Fifth Avenue today, this is again what the space feels like, a regular sidewalk, crowded, the presence of buses and traffic really being what is memorable about the space as opposed to the architectural marvels that we have here. And then what it could look like in the future. So we have our clear pedestrian path against storefronts, and then semi-raised planters on either side, perennial planting, public seating, and also areas in the center of the block for extra spillover space and bus stops as well. Another key thing that we've heard from a lot of stakeholders is that Fifth Avenue kind of quiets down at night. Many storefronts close early, but also it feels unsafe. Lighting is uneven. Some spaces, some sidewalks are very, very dark, and some storefronts sometimes are a little bit too bright to overcompensate for that, which is what we see on this image here. We will be upgrading all of the lighting with new light poles that are dual arm. The idea behind these is that they're able to evenly illuminate the sidewalk and the roadway, so the entire width of the corridor feels like one. And again, we're able to create uniform lighting that alleviates some of that issue and hopefully encourages businesses to remain open a little bit later into the night. As I mentioned, another key initiative is to create safe access points for pedestrians. What you see on this map here is that we are raising all of the north-south crosswalks in these little orange boxes to the same level as the sidewalk. But we're also creating areas where we're raising the entire intersection, which is what you're seeing on these plus signs. This is where we have the majority of pedestrians accessing Fifth Avenue, so we want to ensure the entire space prioritizes pedestrians. There's metrics that show that when vehicles need to go up and down these raised crosswalks, they actually slow down speeds by 10%. So that's really important for this corridor. And in addition to that, we're proposing 2 segments that will have curbless streets. So the roadways at the same level as the sidewalk. That would be between 49 and 51st Street around Rockefeller Center, and between 58th and 59th Street between Grand Army Plaza and Apple Plaza. And that's because these are spaces that today are a lot more active for pedestrians. They're spaces that also get closed during the holidays for special events. So we want to facilitate that, make that into a space that again becomes a little bit more urban and accommodates some of the uses that already occur. So looking at the images of what all of this, how all of this comes together, we see here under number 3, if you follow my cursor, that raised crosswalk at the same level as the sidewalk. So vehicles need to go up and down, reducing street speeds. We see these bump outs again to reduce the length of crosswalks. We're reducing them between 4 and 11 feet, depending on the width of the side street. You see on the corners then dedicated pickup and drop off area. So we are allowing for better traffic flow along Fifth Avenue, and how the corners again are demarcated by bollards to create a safe space for pedestrians while still allowing for easy crossing east, west, and north, south. And this would be a representation of those raised intersections. These are areas where we have crosstown buses or access to subways or roadways that are extremely wide. And again, we want to prioritize pedestrians by having them cross at the same level as the sidewalk and reduce vehicular speeds as they move through Fifth Avenue. This is a typical image of Fifth Avenue today, and you start seeing a lot of the descriptions I was just talking about. We have a lot of infrastructure, we have clutter, we have food trucks, we have people kind of congregating, not quite fitting on the sidewalk before crossing. They're able to cross. And then the proposal, again, creating larger areas where people can wait to be able to cross the street, the crosswalks at the same level as pedestrians, and then planting on either side, creating a sense of greenery as one approaches Fifth Avenue. Lastly, we have the piazza blocks. Again, those blocks that are very unique today in terms of their use, but also their architecture. And we want to use a similar design vocabulary, but also highlight them and honor some of their unique architectural features. Our first piazza block is the New York Public Library. You're all familiar with where it's situated at Bryant Park. And what we're proposing to do here, if you notice on the bottom of the image is what our typical block looks like. On the top is a slightly different design. We're proposing to keep the existing bluestone paving, that's quite iconic, and to place street trees in a way that they echo the same growth of trees we have on the other side. So we're framing the library steps and creating a sense of uniform canopy as you walk along the sidewalk. Here's an image of what the space looks like today. Again, those really iconic stone pavers, and then keeping them on the sidewalk, yet expanding it towards the roadway so we have more space for pedestrians, trees on either side, creating shade along the way, and planters, including flowers to create a sense of seasonal interest throughout. This is the central piazza. So this is located between 49th Street, which would be here on the left-hand side, and 51st on the right-hand side. We have Rockefeller Center on the top, the Channel Gardens and the Atlas Courtyard, Saks Fifth Avenue on the bottom, St. Patrick's Cathedral. And this is one of those areas where we're proposing to create a curbless street. So you'll notice everything in light gray under number 9 will be a concrete roadway that is raised at the same level as the sidewalk. Under 8 would be asphalt. The sidewalks here, just to create visual contrast and ensure pedestrians understand where the sidewalk is versus the roadway, will be fully paved in stone. And we will be relocating the bollards that exist today to the curb line to ensure we have the same level of protection as it exists today. We are keeping the existing trees along Rockefeller Center. You see how, again, these are oriented in a different spacing to ensure we're framing the unique architecture. And we're also keeping the existing tree grades, which we also recognize are key to the iconicity of the space. In front of St. Patrick's, we are creating a pullover area, a pickup and drop-off area. So as we have larger events like funerals or weddings, again, we have space for people to drop and pick up and not impede the flow of traffic on Fifth Avenue. This is a bird's eye view looking at the Channel Gardens with Rockefeller in the background. You see how we have kept those existing trees, existing tree grades, the existing stone paving in front of the thresholds. And in this case, have configured planters differently to actually provide public sitting in front of the Channel Gardens, where we see a lot of people actually today sitting on bollards. They need a place to rest. And again, creating a clear view throughout. In front of Saks, we also have kicked the corridor free of trees, so we can encourage that view corridor that's just so iconic within New York City, and especially during the holidays. So this is an image of what the space looks like today, and the expanded sidewalk, the new bench surrounding planters facing the Channel Gardens, and the existing street trees in the existing tree grades. Along St. Pat's again, we are creating a pickup and drop-off area, and across the street, the same configuration in front of the second building of Rockefeller Center. What the space looks like today, and the idea of how it could look on the holidays, where we have wider sidewalks, a lot more opportunity for holiday decoration, but also better movement east, west, and north, south as the sidewalks get most crowded. And then lastly, we have what we call the Northern Piazza. This is the area around Grand Army Plaza. As you may know, the Southern Grand Army Plaza today is being renovated and restored in terms of its historic footprint. But the areas outside of it today have a bit of a collection of different temporary sidewalk expansions, painted asphalt, those temporary bollards, which really take away from the beautiful upcoming restoration. So we're proposing to enlarge the sidewalks all around it, which is this kind of more brown gray that you see. So they're all at the same level of the plaza, while still recognizing its historic footprint. This will allow for a lot more pedestrian refuge. We see a lot of people congregating on the corners to be able to cross. And then we're also proposing to raise the street along 59th Street between the two plazas, and between 58th and 59th along Fifth Avenue. So again, we can have a much more urban flow of pedestrians when these areas do close for temporarily for the holidays. Lastly, as Madeline mentioned, we recognize that it's as important to treat the areas you see as well as the areas you don't see. And Fifth Avenue is full of aging infrastructure. So we've been working for the past 6 months very closely with Con Ed and DEP to identify the state of all of the infrastructure underground, what is too old that needs to be replaced, what needs to be repaired, to ensure that as we move ahead with this renovation, things happen at once, both underground and above ground, and we also ensure that the roadway doesn't get impacted in the future by potential repairs. So to summarize, this is what Fifth Avenue looks like today, and this is what we hope will look like in the future. We're increasing sidewalks by 46%. We're planting 231 new trees connecting park to park. We're including over 20,000 square feet of new planters. We're reducing intersections north-south between 10 and 11 feet, and east-west by 21 feet, again, facilitating pedestrian movement, accessibility, and ensuring we have a much more sustainable corridor for the future. So with that, I want to thank you and just open the floor for questions.
You can see where the 400 million is going. Thank you. So we'll start off with questions and comments from the committee, but let me, having had the benefit of seeing this presentation before, and I just wanted to raise a few questions, issues as we get into it, and then we'll take it from there. But could you go back to the world-class precedent slide for 1 sec? Great. So, the subject is bike lane, which I know comes up on this a lot. And I did have a chance to kind of go through and look at each of these precedents and ask the question of, well, how do they handle bike traffic? And some of them, you can actually see it. The Champs-Élysées shows someone just biking up the middle of the sidewalk. Regent Street in the middle on the bottom has a dedicated bike lane. It wasn't so clear on the rest of them, so I pulled up some images of how they actually handle bike traffic. And I mean, it's surprising, particularly given the images in this. So this is I'm sure mangle my Spanish, but the Passage de Gracia. And what you see is there's actually a vast shared area that includes motorbikes. This shot happens to be across from a hotel. There are cars that can pull across the sidewalk and pick up passengers directly in front of the hotel. And so the reality of how these different modes combine, in this case it's pretty complicated. And there's a kind of a dedicated asphalt area in the middle that apparently picks up a lot of the motorized traffic and bike traffic. So, that was one example. This is Calle Serrano in Madrid. And apparently this zone by the curb is a shared pedestrian, bike and motor, two-wheeled motor vehicle lane. Although, there's plantings and light poles, so it's not clear exactly how it works. But apparently this is treated as a shared zone for traffic of both kinds. I looked up how bike traffic is handled on the Champs-Élysées. Here's one example. And I just threw that in just to lighten things up. But this is what's actually built there, which is a permanent bike lane, at the edge of the pedestrian area. And so in all cases, I did actually a few of them. Roppongi has kind of an unofficially shared bike and pedestrian area. Sloane Street is so narrow that there was no opportunity really to provide accommodation. But otherwise, there was an attempt made to figure out where this traffic is going. And it was the one use in your chart of, what's there today that isn't being accommodated going forward. So that's the lead into just the general question of share with us your thinking on what's going to happen to bike traffic under this proposal.
I'm gonna start here, and then we can get, to what's gonna happen with bike traffic, but when we started this project, we were willing to look at a bike lane. We looked at the bike lane. First plan had a bike lane.
Yep.
But this is what I want to describe. Many of the streets that you're looking at none of them have nearly the pedestrian traffic as Fifth Avenue. Champs-Élysées is 250 feet wide. We are 100 feet wide. So you're not looking at apples and apples here. You're looking at apples and oranges. So we set out to look at the bike lane. You can get into this more with DOT, but what happened was because of the level of traffic, pedestrian traffic and flow, it turned out that on the eastern side, DOT wanted a left-hand turn lane to avoid all the conflicts that were going to happen. That reduced the the sidewalk on the east side to 20 feet. We have 23 now.
Right.
We reduced it to 20 feet. It was it was like, it was a moment of truth, really, and then they had it, you know, you see the New York Times article, Street Wars, you remember, I read every single one of them, I'm sure you all did too. There's just not enough room on every street for everything, there just isn't. And there had to be a decision made, and the decision was made that there is 10 times the amount of pedestrian traffic than there is of anything else. And that this would be one project where the pedestrian was going to be the foremost consideration because of the numbers. And, you know, it's not like we didn't try, we tried. And we just couldn't make it work.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all know that they're gonna be there anyway, whether you accommodate them or not. So, well, if it's gonna be an enforcement issue of how do we keep them off Fifth Avenue, then I think we'd need to understand, you know, what that's gonna look like. And if, you know, similar to what we're seeing elsewhere in the city, it's not an enforcement program, then how do we provide areas where, you know, pedestrians are gonna be safe while bikes are going through the area? Yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah.
Right? Enforcement on so many issues. This is one of them.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it keeps coming up, and I don't know that we've gotten to a definition yet of how are we going to accommodate it, or where are we going to move it, or, you know, Sixth Avenue, I guess the proposal is going to be to have two-way bike traffic on Sixth in order to accommodate what's, you know, supposed to be going down Fifth. We haven't really had a chance to see what that's gonna look like, but, you know, obviously you're aware of the issue, you know, yeah.
It is, someone else, the New
Yeah.
Jersey City Hall DOT can speak to it, because I'm not the person. I can speak to that we tried.
Yep.
But I can't speak to, you know, the rest of it, so.
Yeah, happy to, well, unless you have a follow-up question.
No, keep going.
Well, funnily enough, just while we're looking at and talking international precedents, I don't know if you may have seen some of the press over the past week or so about Oxford Street.
Oh, yeah.
As well, which the city's just announced the plan to pedestrianise Oxford Street. But when you dig into some of the press, very same dialogue about bikes on Oxford Street as well. And the current position is that the city intends to try and remove bikes from Oxford Street, and I bring it up really just to emphasise that we're not the only city that's trying to grapple with this, and we're very much, you know, as micromobility is growing in this city or internationally, we're really all trying to figure out how best to make all of everything work for everyone. As Madeline said here on Fifth Avenue, the decision not to include a bike lane was really not taken lightly. That was many months of study went into how we could best accommodate bike lane within the design, but it really ultimately started to become detrimental to the overall objectives. As we think about how we accommodate bikes elsewhere, I think it's really important to consider or to keep in mind that streets are never designed in isolation. Streets are part of a network. So we're always thinking about what the broader implications of our work are, not just from these 20 blocks of Fifth Avenue, but the broader network here within Five, general. So as we're thinking about bikes and how they move through the city, we're thinking about what does that mean for the adjacent avenues here? Very important. What does that mean for the cross streets, and what sort of elevated role do the cross streets need to take in the future? In recognition of your point that bikes do need to access Fifth Avenue. So how are we going to accommodate them safely going forward? One of those I think there's kind of a multi-layered response to your question. One is looking at the adjacent avenues, as you said. How can we best accommodate bikes? How can we improve conditions for cyclists on those adjacent roadways? And as you've seen in this district and in the neighboring districts as well, really as the city is evolving, how we think about bikes and mobility, what we're doing is expanding the amount of space we're providing on many lanes to accommodate growth within bikes. Sixth Avenue right here, I think so was one section earlier this year as one example, where we're actually taking an existing lane and wider. The other, another kind of key point to your question about enforcement. One of a very subtle but very, very important thing, which is consistent throughout this Fifth Avenue proposal, is how do we create self-enforcement? And it's not just in the context of bikes, transportation, it's also in the context of security, which is another topic we spend a lot of time about. And one of the kind of consistent approaches to that is how do we create self-enforcing slow speed environment, which works then well for all road users. It's successful for cyclists, it's best for pedestrians, it's best for motor vehicles as well. And that's really kind of how we're thinking about the inevitability that some bikes are going to remain on Fifth Avenue. That's today, you know, continue to use this street. But what we want to do is ensure that that happens in a safe environment. So thinking about how do we reduce traffic speeds on corridor by reducing the number of lanes, by introducing raised intersections, key moments along the corridor, really kind of to create a cohesive environment that works well for all road users without necessarily providing dedicated lane corridor, whilst also thinking about adjacent avenues as well, without the best of traffic that's really traveling through. And then, as said, the cross streets as well, for that local bike access.
Let me, I'll just keep going.
Color
Get
to
you.
the
I'd
e-bike.
like to provide some context here.
That's okay. We'll
Yeah.
work through this and then everybody will get their chance.
Oh, just a quick,
Mhm.
add just additional color. I think Madeline and David covered it all, but I do want to just say, we spent 6 months really trying to make the bike move forward. It was very painful. I just, as on the city hall side, it was, again, not a decision we took lightly. It rose all the way to the mayor, the trade-offs that we had to make on this project. And everything David said is something that, you know, on the city hall side, we're actively sort of pursuing and supporting, which is recognizing that bikes have to go somewhere. They're part of now the city fabric. There's also the other side in terms of not just the built environment infrastructure, but a lot around just the enforcement and it feeling very chaotic now out there on the streets. That's a bigger topic. Our tools as a city are very limited. We are trying, and we've been at this for a year to figure out how to get app companies. They're the elephant in the room. It's a business model, it's a demand. Everybody wants their things in 2 minutes. It is why, and this industry rewards speed. And people are chasing the dollar, workers are chasing the dollar. And so until that fundamental core framework changes, no amount of police enforcement, DOT, great designs, you know, infrastructure, all that stuff will get at it. So there's a big missing piece that we hope to have some more announcements soon about, but I'm just calling that out.
Yeah.
You know, it's nothing you don't know, but.
No, it's, you know, this issue obviously been
Yeah.
kicking around. I looked at
Yeah.
there was an addendum or whatever at the end of the, you know, it was clear that this was posing a lot of issues. So it's, you know, I will say, so we spent a lot of time on this as a committee when we were looking at all the different pieces of Broadway vision. And, you know, that's as complicated in a lot of ways as this proposal is. The difference here is you're going to remake the entire thing all at once and not just in little pieces over a period of years up and down Broadway. So this really is a chance to come out and say, all right, here's where we're going to solve the bike problem because we're spending $400 million and doing it all in one blow. You know, so it's just the question is, all right, well, if it's not a bike lane, then what is it? And this is the test case for what it is. Honestly, I'll get to everybody.
Yeah, but I think it's very important if I may.
Yeah.
There are 2 points of context here that I think would be very helpful. A lot of the concerns that David is bringing up, I share because we've been dealing with them in terms of Broadway vision. So that's a big part of the context because what we're looking in Broadway visions of bike lanes is the recognition that most of them are no longer bikes. They're e-bikes, they're motorcycles, they're deliveries, they're working against the clock. What we're seeing here and what you're presenting, I think, is much more future focused than Broadway vision. You're talking about creating much more pedestrian space and pedestrian safety, which I think we all want to see. So in the context of Broadway, we need dedicated bike lanes that are protecting the pedestrians from the bikes. And here, what I think we have an opportunity is to recognize that bikes at this point in time, mostly being motorcycles, are traffic. So let them be traffic. And as we can, with all the things that you're raising here, you're creating more space that's pedestrian friendly. And then also doing a lot of the things that we really hope to do with Broadway Vision. The greening with the residential conversions that's already begun, that is only going to expand through yes, that's going to expand through Midtown South, mixed use. We want to see much more greening, certainly at Broadway, certainly at Fifth Avenue. All of this is very important. The placemaking that's setting up, all of that's very important. So I think the context of what's traffic, what's not traffic, whether or not we want a pedestrian city again or not, is really, I think, what we're hearing in terms of what this plan could be. So thank you. But I had a question, Dave.
Let me keep going and then we'll come back to
But
you.
questions usually.
Constantly, yeah.
Recognized, can you
Yeah.
not interrupt?
Well,
While someone
let me-
else has the
But
floor?
don't we usually do
No,
questions before comments?
The chair has
Let
the
me-
floor.
let me
you
just
go
go
through
through it.
questions, and you will call.
Then we'll, yeah, thanks, Phil. So the other, just backing up a little bit, I figured we'd start off with the thorniest part first and then work our way. So you're already at schematic design, there's already some form of a funding commitment for this. So what is it that you want from the community board, and are we too late to provide input on this design, given what your schedule is and, you know, the progress that you've made?
Well, I would say, and I'm not officially saying this because I'm not a city agency, but I would say, I think your comments are always welcome. That doesn't mean, and we want to hear from you. I think that the community is important. I think we have been listening to community. It may not be everyone that you may think yet. We should listen to first, you know, we have done a lot of studies on this, years. The studies on this project started in 2020 during COVID. So I mean, there's been so many studies on this, and so we're interested in input, but you know, if you want us to consider trying to fit yet another mode of transportation.
No, I'm just saying in general, you know, we have, over the last few years, we've formed a really good relationship with DOT where we're seeing things early in the conceptual phase. So we have a chance to collect community input and, you know, provide that to DOT in an early phase where we then can subsequently see what's been incorporated and understand why things may or may not. We seem to be past that window on this. I mean, forget bike lanes, because I understand what that does. But this seems like a very complete proposal, as you would expect by the end of schematic design. So, you know, is this a, you know, come here, present it and ask us for a letter of support? Is there something else that you would like us to do?
This is gonna be ongoing because, you know, the biggest, the biggest something in the room.
Elephant.
Think about, thank you. I want to say monkey.
Don't think
That's
about
not right, that's okay. Is the infrastructure. So a lot of, as we move on, is unfortunately gonna be dictated by this massive mess we have under the roadway. So, in that, you know, as we are doing borings and all these other underground studies early, but never early enough, because as you may very well know, we don't have great drawings of the
Sure.
underneath city.
Yep.
You know, when we tore up Lower Manhattan after 9/11, why did it take 20 years to rebuild? Because the maps were all wrong, if there were maps. So this is just a state of what's going on. You never really know what's underneath until you open up the street. You can make as many holes as we want, and still, until you rip it up, you never really know. So a lot of what's gonna end up dictating this is gonna be the infrastructure and the vaults underneath and everything that we find. So I want to be able to say what you see is what you're gonna get, but you know, like, we're gonna be moving along, so your comments, you should make them, you know,
Right.
we can't promise we can accommodate them, or that they're, or we may have looked at them already, because been doing this for a long time already, and it's slow, you know, it's slow.
Yeah.
So,
But we have a different audience than, you know, when you work with the bids and the agencies, it's a different audience than when we get people that just dial into calls or, you know, that grab us on the street corner. So we want the opportunity to be able to at least go to the public and say, here's the plan. You know, tell us what input you have and we'll try and represent you in, you know, in forwarding that. So we, you know, we'd like to understand, you know, what you see the process. I know, so you had a chart on timing, you know, how is this gonna work?
we're at that, right, early.
Yeah.
Early on, and we did get comments from that, you know, and speak to a lot of people from that. But, you know, comments are always welcome, and if we cannot accommodate, we'll explain why we can't accommodate, right?
Right.
This is not a really opaque, this is transparent, it's just like there's certain things we can do. Certain things we can't do, and we'll tell you what we can do, what we can't do, and why we can do it, and can't do it, so it's like, I mean, is that fair or different?
Appreciate that. Zool, honestly, let me,
What
we'll
we
get to
can
you.
ask about is the phase build-them, so we can hear about what the infrastructure and what the timeline is.
Yeah,
We haven't
actually,
heard
you,
that yet.
you had a timeline slide in there, right?
So we are here. So as you mentioned, we are completing preliminary designs. I do wanna call out that part of the reason why things look very polished is that we also needed to ensure the vision was robust enough to garner support from the business community to make sure we could secure funding. But what I would also like to say is that for us, it's really important to receive feedback, because as Madeline mentioned, the tough road ahead is over here on the final design and approvals. So what's going to happen is, EDC will be issuing an RFP for design, coming up, and an RFP for construction management. And at that point is when we're really, calibrating things. There will be things that we perhaps cannot accomplish, and hearing from you and the community what you value the most is going to help us prioritize what do we really try to fight for and refine versus what perhaps is a detail we would have loved to have, but maybe there can be a compromise because of something else we discovered. So we're expecting about 2 years of design and engineering and approvals to be able to begin construction in 2028. You'll also notice down here how while there is a bit of a gap in that design process, utility coordination will continue throughout the entire course of this time. Again, because that is one of the biggest, that will have one of the biggest impacts on our ability to accomplish this vision. To ensure that whatever needs to be upgraded or replaced goes hand in hand with the streetscape. We do have a spaghetti down there.
150-year-old spaghetti.
Trying to move as much from under the sun, you know, there's. You know, kind of has a lot of infrastructure into sidewalks in general. Maybe not such a smart move, you know, that it's under the sidewalks. So, you know, we're looking at like, how can we avoid some of this in the future and some of this constant digging and all that. That's a big part of it. Now that's hard, you know, we have a lot of lofty ideas about that, you know, that are, you know, even in this moment beaten back, but we're still moving forward with kind of forward thinking ideas about how like really kind of make that congeal in a way that the city has never had. Because, as you know, utilities don't coordinate with each other. So, you know, and when you have a street as old as this one, you know, it's a mess.
Okay. Just a couple of other, was public restrooms, did this come up for review in the design?
It's not a park, so there's really no space. One of the things that we also don't have, we don't have real piazzas. We don't have real public spaces up there. named Central Park and Marine Park, but we don't, the avenue itself, we don't have any real public space.
Right.
So it has to be provided. There are buildings on Fifth Avenue, that I'm sure you know, that do provide public restrooms. But we don't have any room there.
Yeah, because it's, you know, that in general is a comment that we get everywhere, whether it's Pops or,
We actually looked
you
at
know.
it, but it just didn't have.
Right, okay. Is there a goal to move private cars off of Fifth? You know, originally this was proposed as a busway, you know, so it's not that. But it is, you know, 25% or whatever, 40% less than it was before. So is there inherent in this design a goal to move private traffic off of Fifth? Is that what makes the numbers work?
I think David can speak
So,
to that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the answer to that is that it's too soon to engage in that conversation. You know, really as the design advances, so too is going to our traffic, so too will our traffic analysis. Collecting data, we're expanding the amount of traffic that what we're doing, so we can understand, so we can better understand the impact of the project. Once we've completed that work, we'll then be in a better position to understand what we're bringing to it.
But I think it's interesting because, also because you see this, you saw that in that slide about traffic reduction of lanes everywhere. The DOT is making a concerted effort in Manhattan to reduce car lanes everywhere. We're gonna be under construction. Cars are gonna have to go somewhere else or not anywhere. You know, people, I mean, I guess the message in the city is don't bring your car in.
Right.
I think that's, I think that's more and more the message. How people get that message is gonna be interesting over time.
Yeah,
As
yeah.
you see all the.
I mean, I remember your membership raised that, you know, as a concern that the person that
But-
pulls up to buy,
Like, getting rid of two car lanes. I mean,
Right,
this is
right.
like a big move for them to like realize, like you can't, like everybody else, you can't have everything, right? Like what is the most important thing? And I even getting the property owners and retailers to consider pedestrians as being more important than their private cars.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, it's a big deal. I mean, you may not think it's a big deal, but it is a big deal. And
is you can't have everything, is that the new shopping tagline for Fifth Avenue?
yeah, I said a long time.
Yeah. And I guess, Madeline, just to understand, you know, how this kind of public-private partnership works, if you could explain a little bit about what the nature of the sort of support is coming from the Fifth Avenue Association. And there are, you know, areas, forgetting the public realm piece, some of the buildings, the retail spaces, you know, how are operations of this area going to work going forward?
Question. The bids are really mostly the Fifth Avenue Association. Even though we're the smallest bid in the bid with the largest area of this, so. We will take on a lot of the operations of keeping the trees and the plants and the, you know, looking good. We will have to have a whole landscape program that will be developed over the course of time. It's gonna be a huge financial obligation on our part going forward. But constituency has decided that it would take that on, so that's gonna cost a bit a lot. Period.
Okay. All right, I didn't have anything else, so we can open it up to other members of the committee. Samir?
I have a lot of questions, but I'll just go one at a time, so that way everyone can ask. So as you mentioned, there's that public meeting in the basement of some building, I don't remember which building it was, I was there. What has changed in the plan, if anything, since that public meeting?
Not much, I mean, just more details.
Fundamentally, in terms of how the space is allocated, not much has changed, but we have refined a lot, the details, as Madeline mentioned, the paving design, the materials, the sizes of things. We are, you know, again, it looks very clean from above ground, but we have actually dived into understanding where we have vaults, where we have building vaults, connet vaults, water mains, to understand how we can detail this in a way that's robust. So again, paving design, the bench design, the lighting design, all of that has gone to the next level of refinement. So the renderings may look similar, but the detail has advanced quite a lot since then.
And then on slide 7, I have a couple questions. It's all about the buses.
The process, yeah.
When it says that the proposed design will not significantly change the current bus capacity, what does that mean?
What it means is that we're not proposing anything that changes how the corridor works today. You still have your dedicated express bus lane, and you still have the same number of bus stops as you have. Now, could it be optimized? Right now, some blocks have 4 bus stops, and some lines stop on every single block, which sometimes contributes to traffic. Those are the conversations we are looking to have with MTA to see if there is a way to optimize that, or if there's a way to understand there are certain blocks that receive more passengers than others. And could we do something to actually facilitate their operations, make them move a little more efficient?
Okay,
You know, this is it's an interesting subject, and as somebody who takes public transportation every day, I will tell you, some people say, oh, you must not take public, I take it every day. One of the first things I heard when I came I agreed to be part of this project was how many empty buses there were. So we had at the time Sam Schwartz, Marlin, FAA they do a study. And much of what you see, I mean, the study is enormous, and you certainly can go into detail on it if somebody really wants to. But local buses get used, or there, they get on, they get off. Express buses, not so much. We have more express buses than by far than anywhere, by far. Many of them are. We have all the pretty much all the deadhead buses as well. So the question is, do we have to live with during rush hour, the morning and the afternoon, do we have to live with blocking every crosswalk, every side street for 3 or 4 hours in the afternoon, 2 hours in the morning, or is there a better way of doing this? And that is, I think, a valid question that's worth answering. We have on the express buses a lot of zeros, but we have on average less than 10%. It's 55 people on the bus. That's 5.5 on a bus. New York City pays for those buses. I mean, and are we contributing to our own congestion? It's a good question. So it's one that needs more work.
so I just want to clarify, you said you're not reducing the number of bus lanes, but right now there are 2.
And there still are
And there still are 2.
I only see 1 in the.
No,
There's 2.
curb lane.
One for
Okay, same as,
If it's a shared lane, it's not a bus lane.
it's right now, it's a
Works
shared lane.
exactly like it works today. So today,
Yeah.
you have your dedicated bus lane, that's the express buses. And then you have the westernmost lane where buses either pull up to bus stops or vehicles need to cross over to take a right-hand turn. So it's working exactly as it is today. Where we are reducing lanes is the travel lanes on the east side.
Okay, so I guess why is it not still red? Why are we changing it?
Why is it not still red? Because a lot of people hate the color red. They feel the paint wears off over time quite quickly. It leads to a aesthetic of disrepair. So we're also trying to create a streetscape that perhaps can have a little bit easier upkeep and look a little bit nicer aesthetically.
So the middle lane will still have that disrepair, just not 2 lanes.
Well,
We're working on that.
David said they're trying different ways of doing.
Yeah, I know in London, they'll mix the color into the asphalt, that helps, for example.
So,
Those signs are.
Yeah, I think. Just to clarify though, from an operational perspective, that curb lane of Fifth Avenue isn't changing tomorrow. So as Isabel said, the majority of that curb lane today, while marked as a bus lane, is actually a bus stop. So bus stops are typically red, they're marked bus lanes, it's red, and then right turns to side streets. People today and. So from an operation perspective, there was no change to the third lane and no overall change to bus operation. I think the comments that we're hearing about the durability of red paint, the visual impact of red paint are taken. And, you know, as the design continues to evolve over the next years, I think it is something that we want to spend some further time on. Because it does not only really benefit the town, but also a system like that.
Okay, last question on the slide. You said turnings are not changed. In 2021, Community Board 5 supported a busway proposal that would do turn restrictions. Why are we not doing turn restrictions?
So as I just mentioned to your colleague earlier on, we are still working through the analysis, the overall traffic analysis for the plan. So that would be continuing in parallel development design. There may be a point where we have to look at turn restrictions at certain intersections to ensure the traffic proceed, but that's too early to get into the specifics.
So I guess, why is it too early now when it wasn't too early 4 years ago when it was going to be implemented?
Well, what I can tell you now, I wasn't personally involved in the previous project. What I can tell you is that we're really involved in a comprehensive, not just localized traffic study, but a comprehensive or district-wide traffic study to support this project. So from that, we'll be able to determine what the impacts of the specifics will be, and then what mitigations will be required to make necessary actions.
I have a few more questions, but I want to make sure if anyone else has any.
Is the makeup of the bus, the actual equipment that runs down Fifth different? I just find, and it was one of the comments we got the last time, is that it's a real barrier to shopping across the street. They're bigger and noisier and faster than, you know, than. Yeah, but I mean, I've been on Oxford Street, which carries a ton of bus traffic. It doesn't feel the same way.
Buses are bigger.
Yeah.
We have, since we have.
Are they diesel or are they, no?
One guy,
Okay. So it's just the sheer volume.
yeah, they are diesel, sorry.
Oh, they are diesel.
Oh, electric.
Yeah.
They are diesel, no, they are. diesel.
Yeah.
Sorry about
But it is the sheer volume that creates that experiential impact. You walk down Fifth Avenue and it's just all buses and you can't see across.
that. And you also can't cross. This it's blocking, as I said before, you just really can't cross east west.
Right. Okay, thanks. Anybody else? want to-
Sorry, I have a question.
Yeah.
I was curious if there were already plans for events along this space and kind of what was the calendar, what types of events might be there?
So we've had a lot of success during the holidays, just other than weather, not be great. So weather, and it's hard doing it because it's December, but we've had success, I think, closing the street. You know, we've done a lot of parties, and when I say parties, I don't mean public for the public, you know, just free stuff and all that. And we're exploring this year, just maybe doing a little calmer, not doing so much, but just closing the streets on Sundays during the holiday for this year. So it's really more like just trying to get more people to come, New Yorkers to come and enjoy it, but we're not really doing, we don't do events. There's 11 parades right now on Fifth Avenue. Well, people have very strong opinions about that, both ways, but I think, you know, as time goes on, it becomes a little bit more problematic, both the counterterrorism and as well as just everybody else who's trying to get around, so but I don't think it's that we're gonna plan on doing that many more events, but that when I think the holiday season is important. And I think it's time that everybody just likes to come there, see the tree, be there, and so we try to figure out a way to accommodate more people doing that.
Can I ask?
Sure.
Are there any plans for, understood, it seems like there's not that much of a change to status quo plan to what's happening right now, with raids and maybe some closures during the holiday season. Are there any plans for maybe like seasonal installations that would happen along? Now we have extra space that we can actually do both inputs with their plans.
Yeah, we'd like to think that maybe there's some more that we can do on the, that we've never been able to do before. Not big enough, like in the plaza, a larger public space, but part of it is that of the idea of maybe there's some other kind of place maybe that we could do that just at different times of the year.
Would the strategy be to do it for the whole block or just for some places?
Not the whole block. I mean, we wouldn't do anything to close. a block. That's what you mean. Yeah. No, we wouldn't, no, we would never do that. So to be antithetical to what we're trying to do is just bring more people comfortably to the area. But we wouldn't do it. I don't know that somebody else might do it.
Well, thank you for the presentation. Really a lot of work that's gone into it. A question on the street use grant page. So that makes sense in terms of the various modes of transportation to use. Perhaps as a percentage of total on a weekday between 5 and 6 p.m. As it correlates to the current design, so you have 2/3 of the use being by pedestrians and maybe 20-ish% by bus, and then another 10-ish% by cars, including taxis. I was wondering if you've observed any seasonality of that, particularly in the winter, maybe folks use buses and private cars more, and you would just need to budget a little wider, usually another lane for the four-wheelers versus the walkers.
Not really. I mean, I would say the slowest month of the year is probably August, but I think that's the slowest month. Anywhere. But I would say that in terms of, I mean, 23,000 during the holidays on a Saturday. We don't get that during the rest of the year, but we would never even be close to what we have as the size now. And frankly, even at 33 feet, 33.5 feet, it still doesn't really accommodate everybody. It's just what we get. You know, it's just like, you know, we still don't have, if you were to actually calculate minus all the obstructions and everything, what we have, 33.5 feet, still probably will be somewhat crowded. And at Hollis, they'll still be crowded. They just won't be as crowded. But no, I wouldn't say that there's any time of the year that's slow. I mean, bad weather's slow, but not a particular time of the year.
So when is this traffic study done?
We've done innumerable traffic.
It just says a weekday. It says Tuesday, October 24th, 2023. Is when we did the sidewalk count. Okay. And then the traffic counts were on Wednesday, October 25th. The counts were at peak hours, so between 5 and 6 p.m.
These came from DOT counts.
That's all. Another question for me, if I can have the time, is, well, sounds like you've done various routes and studies. I was wondering if the topic of crash could be in the surveys of the pedestrians, like whether they felt like there's sufficient crash codes on the street, and if there was a mention. It did not come up, however, Fifth Avenue Association has recently deployed their own trash cans along their corridor. So what we're doing is understanding from them user behavior, where the trash cans most effective, what size works the best, and we'll have that inform our final placement and selection.
Yeah, I would say we pick up the trash quite a bit. Now, of course, that's maybe gonna change with this new containerization. I'm not sure what that's all landing still, but you know, we'll do whatever we have to do, keep the streets clean. And cleanliness is one of our top priorities, so. Say each probably budget. Security and cleanliness are the, you know, the majority of the most of the money from the bid goes to that, yeah.
Apologies, I'm gonna return to the bike question. So tourism on this corridor, very important. So let's imagine I'm a tourist, I'm from Paris. I'm very used to protected bike lanes. I get around my home city easily by bike. I come to New York City. I rent a city bike at the south end of Central Park, and I wanted to bike downtown, go shopping, or go to Bryant Park. Where do I go? Which avenue do I take for what should be a very easy route, just heading 1 mile or so south?
Well, it depends. I mean, it would depend on what your ultimate destinations, but if you're heading downtown, like. And you're at Fifth Avenue, I mean, your downtown options are going to be Seventh Avenue and Third Avenue, right, and this you may have, well, actually Third Avenue, maybe it's CB6, but you've just presented plans for protected bike lanes on Third Avenue to your neighbours, just a couple of months ago. That's a project that we plan to implement in the coming months. So from a downtown connectivity perspective, Fifth Avenue is pretty central, but to both Seventh and really ultimately depending on destination. But if you are a visitor to the city and perhaps less comfortable cycling on the major avenue, then Broadway is also a very good downtown.
There's a sidewalk.
Yeah, well, that's not.
If we have protected by law.
Did you have anything else?
Yeah, my other question is, okay, so looking at the timeline question, we're talking about construction beginning in 2028. That's if all goes smoothly with the preparation process. So we're talking about completion sometime in the 2030s, is that correct?
If it goes into the 2040s, I think.
Yeah.
So,
With the caveat that, with this one, there's a lot of unknown with the underground utility coordination will be very complicated.
Sure.
Nominally, yes, one of those.
Right, so my follow-up is the Manhattan of 2035, let's say, it's gonna look very different than the Manhattan of 2025. In all likelihood, there will be many fewer cars in this borough than there are now. I mean, the congestion pricing fee will have increased at least twice by then. A car-free busway will have existed on 34th Street for several years. There will likely be one on 42nd Street as well, probably several more. So my question is why, if we're talking about a design that's not going to be actually implemented until, perhaps a decade from now, why are we maintaining a car travel lane at all when a lot of the surrounding streets are getting rid of them entirely?
Well, what are the surrounding streets that are getting rid of them entirely?
34th Street, 42nd Street, possibly, those are being
There's across
discussed.
streets and they're different, but they're different. Every street is different. So you're talking about two streets now. You don't know what the effect is gonna be on 34th Street either. So, I mean, you don't. So we don't know what the effect is gonna be on long-term on Fifth Avenue. If there are no cars, maybe there'll be, hovercraft. I mean, we have no idea what's gonna be. Then we'll accommodate whatever it needs to be at the time it needs to be. If a travel lane, remember, there's only one travel lane. If there's a travel lane that's not needed anymore, it'll become something else. So that's the way it'll be. As we've accommodated different ways of traffic, but an 11-foot lane will become something else for 11 feet. If there are no more cars in the city.
I think an important aspect of the design, when we started, we had sometimes a scheme that was meandering. Sometimes we had a scheme that had left turn lanes or right turn lanes. What we found from that process is that it did not allow for flexibility for exactly what you're saying, for accommodating potential changes in the future, whether it is buses or taxis or private vehicles. So what this design does, in my opinion, is that should traffic modes change, should there be more cars and less buses, or should there be more buses and less cars, it still works. Nothing in the design gets compromised. It's about operations as opposed to physical infrastructure. And that's what's important. It's the physical infrastructure that takes a long time to get to. Operational changes in how traffic works, signalization, dedicated lanes can actually change quite easily with this design. And that's what we see on many other streets as they're changing into busways or other, right? The physical infrastructure is not changing. It's the lane designation that is.
It's the same size lanes, all of them. Some car lanes are 10 feet, some bus lanes are 12 feet. This is one.
We have them all at 11 for that
feet
reason.
so that they can be.
Thank you.
So I have a question that really can't be answered until you get under the ground, but it's based on some discussions I've had with some urban planners and planning. With some near model down Coral Gables and some things over here. So the question is, would you consider, in addition to the planters, the tree pits, tree corridors? Which could give us so much climate
Already
resilience.
done.
Let's hear about that.
I don't have an image of that, but here's what we are doing. We don't have that. This entire area where you see all the trees, this entire dark gray area, all of that will be soil underneath the pavement. So all of those trees are interconnected. They have sufficient soil volume to expand beyond the planter that you see. But the other thing they do is they collect stormwater.
That's fabulous.
So underneath that entire pit, we're going to have 12 inches of gravel. So as soon as those trees don't need the water, that goes into that gravel bed. I'm just gonna be very honest with you, we don't yet know where that goes. We're still doing tests to understand if the subgrade can actually absorb that, or if that needs to be sent back into the storm system. But either way, this is really minimizing flooding, because when there's a rainstorm, the trees absorb that water first, as opposed to shedding it all to the drainage system.
Miracle Mile, Coral Gables, after
the same.
whatever that hurricane was, they were back in business within a week, whereas others was to get back within a year.
So we're doing the same system they have on Miracle Mile.
Is it permeable pavement
It's
there?
not permeable paving, water will percolate either through the tree grades or the planters. The issue with permeable paving is that you need to vacuum it quite often. And with the amount of foot traffic we have here, that would be even more. I think the bids have carefully analyzed what they are able to maintain, and that goes a little bit above and beyond.
I just want to confirm, for the bus stops, I didn't see any bus shelters. Are there no plans for bus shelters in this project?
We don't, we have benches. Whether there's bus shelters, we're not sure. There are right now too many bus shelters, and there are right now too many because the J.C. Deco makes the highest amount of money on Fifth Avenue. Personally, I don't consider that a reason to have a bus shelter, so they can have Chanel in front of Louis Vuitton. I mean, for me, that's not a good excuse, but others may think differently. So if there's a bus shelter, it'd be because we need a bus shelter, not because someone wants to pay $10 million for advertising.
But right now, there are no plans for bus shelters.
We haven't placed any of the furniture
Got it.
yet, so, we're not there yet.
We don't design it, however, I would say the space between the trees can fit a bus shelter. So we did make sure that that could happen, should that be a city desire. The space between the trees also accommodates all of the bus ADA ramps that deploy out. So all of this has really impacted the streetscape design.
And you will not see as many bus shelters in other cities as we have here in certain areas for the one purpose.
I care less about the advertising and more about the rain cover.
Yes, I know you do, but
Okay, anybody else on the committee in the room? We have a hand up. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
So I know that the original 400 million capital allocation, there was a plan to get ROI within 5 years of starting the project. That financial model ever include the level of revenue that I'm constructing?
it does, but it doesn't include, the length of time. We don't really know that yet. There was a original projection done by HRMA. Offhand, I can't remember how long it was. So there was like a few years put in there. I'm sure it's gonna be longer. We also don't know how we're staging it. So it's hard to tell. It's hard to make that, the idea is not ripping up the whole avenue at once. The idea would be phases, even though it's not a phase project, it's still working in phases, so hard to really project that.
What are the main intersections, I'm sorry, for the infrastructure projects, for the water mains and the every single one of them? Is that gonna go block by block?
There's new technology that allows you to do directional drills. So depending on what the size of the infrastructure is, you can just open it on a few intersections and then just do underground drilling.
And some of it is liners, like they have to reline the sewers are in bad shape, but not the actual. They are looking at relining them, which is a much faster process, right?
Yeah, which also happens on specific
Yeah.
points.
Working south to north or the other way?
We don't know.
Oh, yeah, but the street narrows in the north, so it seems to make makes ideological sense to start there. Could start from a few directions, depends like, how many crews can we get, you know, what is. You know. what-
I hear it flows downhill, is that,
That's many.
yeah.
Still don't. Get back to you on the number, or we just don't have. A lot of answers yet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Given time, do you think we could move to public comments so we could?
Yeah, well, we have one comment, there are two hands up on the attendees, so.
Thanks.
We have a public comment?
Yeah.
All right, first up, we'll go to Calvin Harrison. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, yeah, can folks hear me?
Yep.
Great, thank you so much for this presentation, and for the thorough discussion from the committee members. My name's Calvin Harrison. I'm a community organizer with the Street Vendor Project, and I work with a lot of the vendors in the area of Fifth Avenue. I know there's been a lot of discussion among them. Unfortunately, no one was able to join this evening from the vendors themselves, but I just wanted to ask the project team and maybe also hear from some of the community board members if there's been any discussion of accommodating vendors in these new plans, a widened sidewalk and a larger, more inviting pedestrian realm is something that will invite people to sit and spend time. And I think vendors are an important part of that realm, providing a cold drink, a warm coffee. I know there are parts of this street that are closed at different times of the week and year, but there are also parts of Fifth Avenue in the project zone that are open for vending, either part-time or full-time. And so I just love to hear what considerations have been given to that. I know I reached out earlier to the community board to try to set up a one-on-one meeting. Many of the vendors are not English speakers, so a forum like this might be difficult for them. And I'd love to know if there's a chance to sit down and make sure that their voices get heard. There are also business owners in the area who contribute to the local economy, contribute to that large tax base that comes out of Fifth Avenue that you were talking about earlier. Thanks so much.
Right now, vendors are allowed, and we have vendors pretty much on every corner. But Fifth Avenue is reserved for pedestrians, and that's really the main focus of this project, and there are vendors on every corner. So I don't suspect that's gonna change. And, you know, let's see, now it's pretty much at this point, the simple answer.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. You're right that vendors are already a crucial part of the streetscape, and vendors obviously serve a pedestrian consumer base. But I guess what I'm particularly asking about is the use of planters and trees. I know there was just a discussion about how there's been accommodations made to ensure that potential bus shelters could be put in. Are there also considerations to making sure there's space between the trees for the standard size of vending carts, things like that?
I don't think we've gotten to that detail yet. As you know, that vendors are allowed on Sundays as well as after 7 o'clock. And we haven't gotten into those details yet. We're dealing with a lot of issues like infrastructure and counterterrorism and all sorts of other things right now. But you know, that time will come.
All right, next up is Jim Wright. You should be able to mute yourself.
Hi, Jim Wright, Community Board 5 resident. I use the sidewalks here as a pedestrian and also a bus rider, local buses on Fifth Avenue. I do not bike because it feels completely unsafe at this point. So it's a little bit disappointing that the bicycle lane was dropped from the plans. As shown earlier, one of the compensations that was mentioned in some earlier presentations of this project, of the current phase, regarding bus lanes, that the city would be looking very seriously about a north-south bike lane on Sixth Avenue as a compensation for Fifth Avenue. And just as a reminder, there is no southbound bus lane or bike lane between Second Avenue and Seventh Avenue in this area. So it is really deficient in terms of bike infrastructure. So I feel like if the city is dedicating $400 million to a project like this, there is a real responsibility to look beyond the actual boundaries of this project and look at it from a larger planning perspective and solve some of the other problems that may be not dealt with by this project and maybe even negatively impacted. So that's my comment about bike lanes. The other issue I'd like to talk about a little bit is the bus routes along Fifth Avenue. I do ride the local bus sometimes during the week, also during weekends. I can tell you it's not uncommon to sit in the bus for 10 minutes from one intersection to the next due to the automobiles in the right lane, both parking, stopping and dropping off, and turning right. And the plan that's shown now, as far as I can tell, pretty much replicates the current bus condition. And I guess I have a few questions there regarding the buses. One, is there plans to have exclusive bus lanes with camera enforcement on the buses, similar to what we recently saw presented by DOT on Madison Avenue going north? And is it possible that the number of right turns onto the odd numbered avenues could be restricted so that not every westbound right turn would allow a right turn in order to speed up the buses? And the third comment I have is I don't see any accommodations here for taxi and for hire vehicle drop-offs. And one thing I'm missing from the plan is what happens on the side streets on both sides. And I think there needs to be accommodations for drop-offs of taxis and for hire vehicles, and an acknowledgement that the right turns really are what's slowing down the bus lanes. And I hope that there's a real serious discussion going on with MTA. I keep hearing promises about talking to the MTA, but I haven't heard them directly involved in these discussions. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll try and respond to all of your points in order. Please jump in if I missed it. I think your first point about making accommodations as so far as the bike network are entirely correct and very much in keeping with DOT's broader goals for the area. I would just add that as I mentioned in response to an earlier question, we did actually present plans for a third avenue protected bike lane to 6 earlier this year, and that is a project that we do plan to install later this year. So from the downtown protected bike network is getting a big boost on third avenue. Your second question, I think, was about bus lane enforcement. So yes, very much included as part of the proposal, not just for this project, but the bus network broadly. So onboard cameras will certainly be a part of the certainly part of the current thinking. I think maybe just to acknowledge some of the points that others have made here this evening. enforcement technology is going to continue to evolve. And so by the time this project actually is realized, well, from an enforcement perspective, but plus then enforcement is certainly part of the plan. To your question about right turning traffic and possible right turn restrictions, as said, we are still working through the traffic analysis and the traffic analysis for the project. It's too early to say if we would be specific, we would be targeting specific intersections for right turn restriction. But the point about them impeding bus traffic is well taken. I think certainly something we would consider at certain intersections should the analysis warrant that type of thing. Oh, and pick up and drop off. Thank you. So I think Isabel has the best slide here on the screen if you're able to see that. The intention is to be able to accommodate pick up and drop off at every side street along the corridor. So if you're traveling in a taxi, let's say, or a for hire vehicle down Fifth Avenue, the intention is that you would make a left or a right turn, and then there would be space provided through the appropriate curb regulation to allow for pick up and drop off to happen at the intersection, so just past the crosswalk.
I'm glad you remembered all that in order, David. Really, we want to deter anybody from stopping on Fifth Avenue, no matter what. Getting a ticket, doing whatever is necessary to not have people stop on Fifth Avenue. But I would also say it's, and as a rider of the local bus on Fifth Avenue, I will also say right-hand turns definitely can impede, but the number, I'll get back to it, the number of express buses and empty buses are a big deterrent to traffic, bus traffic moving on Fifth Avenue. I take the local bus, I try to avoid it during rush hour, but it's you know, it's tough. It's tough.
Okay, next up is Charles Nye.
Thank you, Samir. Thank you very much. I would like to know if there's been any feedback from any pedestrians who have disabilities, especially those who are blind and low vision, if there was any thought to any special sort of tactile guideways along the sidewalk to help those pedestrians navigate the space, especially with the plans having these curbless environments. And I don't know if you guys would be willing to come to the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities this Friday and do the same presentation and get some feedback, because they have a virtual meeting this Friday. I was also wondering about paratransit like Access-a-Ride, if they would be able to stop on Fifth Avenue, or would they be stopping in those designated zones? I would like to address the bike lane. Would I be correct or incorrect that by motorists losing their lanes, which of course is the main stakeholder who's kind of losing out here of space, would I be correct to say that actually having one lane of traffic would actually make it safer for cyclists to actually cycle in that space instead of needing a protected bike lane, which logically would really need to be in areas where there's more than one traffic lane, or even more traffic than what would happen with one lane of traffic. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts on that would be. And I guess my final question is, do we know if there's any committee members who are affiliated with Transportation Alternatives? I read in some news articles that Samir is affiliated with Transportation Alternatives. So I'm just wondering if we could hear about that too, just so that the public are aware if any members in this committee still are or have been, as reported in some articles. Thank you.
Well, I'll start with the last one and then we'll, so Charles, that we have a conflict of interest policy, and so that's what we follow at the committee level. And we don't discuss what people do for a living. We only look at it when it's a conflict of interest, so. On the rest of it, I'll pass it back to you.
I'll start with the first question. We actually have met with the Mayor's Office of People with Disabilities plans in great detail, perhaps a little more detail than I'm presenting to you today. One of those details has to do with consistent tactile warning strips, where we do have raised crosswalks where you see all the bollards on the image that will have all contrasting tactile warning strips that are much lighter than the proposed stone, so that you actually can both visually perceive it, but also hear it if you have a detectable cane. We have also worked very closely to incorporate all the actuated pedestrian signals, which are things that we're starting to show up on all intersections. We're incorporating them as part of the design from day one to make sure we can meet all accessibility guidelines. And the one suggestion they did have for us, which we're looking to implement, is that they did mention to us that a visually impaired person can perceive the curb or the high moment on the street to understand they reach the center line of the crosswalk and they're about to descend back down onto the next sidewalk over. So we actually thought that was a really good suggestion to do, especially where we have curbless streets, to still ensure that experientially you can feel a slight change in elevation that's still ADA compliant, so that those that are visually impaired can have a sense of the distance they're crossing. So we're actively coordinating with them. As I mentioned, we had a meeting with them about a month ago, and as the design continues to advance, we will have them continually involved in reviewing our details. I think the question on the bike lane, I don't know, David, if that's your expertise.
Yeah, I think what I would say, or what I mentioned in previous responses, that one of the overwhelming, or one of the largest objectives of the project is to create a self-enforcing environment, which is safe, that inherently safer for all road users, regardless of mode. And so I think that is really kind of key to the design, key to the intent. That what we're looking to do is create a slower speed environment on Fifth Avenue, which would be enforced through the narrowing of the roadway and the raised intersections, which Isabel just described, which in turn then becomes safer for all road users.
That was everyone from the public.
Okay. All right, so Madeline, back to the question I asked before, was this an information session? Are you looking for us to provide, a show of support? What did you have in mind?
It's a very interesting, I feel like a little duck here, because we actually didn't even discuss what we were.
We have pastries. Yeah.
And hear what you have to say. If there's something formally you would like to, I mean, look. We understand that we didn't hit every mark, but we hit as many marks as we tried. We also know that the city doesn't have a pedestrian forward advocacy group that is noisy and makes a lot of, waves. But we feel like we're doing what we can here. We're not in your look, we don't have formal approvals here. We're here to basically keep you informed. So I don't know, the EDC, if you have any thoughts about whether
I don't think we're looking for anything. This at this time, I could perhaps get closer to that milestone. Something like that.
Okay, I mean,
Yeah.
so the feedback that you heard in the questions, I mean, you're gonna deal with that? I mean, what we've done in the past on other things where people have asked us for formal response is to basically say, great, we're making progress and these are the types of issues that were raised in our session. that we would hope would be addressed in the future generation of the design.
Yeah, I would just add, that so this contract is closing out. We're issuing the RFP for the next contract. So it would be good to have. For comment in writing. As that starts, it's have that could be share. Open design team, it's very.
Okay, so, I mean, I think we'll do what I mean, we can talk about it, but I think we'll do what we traditionally do and just kind of support the, you know, the direction here, raise the issue that we've raised and get them on the record. And then, as I said, the expectation is at some point in the next design phase, we'll come back and do this again. Yeah, Samir.
Yeah, I guess I would actually want us to take a stronger stance. I think that we should support it, but I do think that we should make certain comments extra highlighted. Specifically, I do think that if we want to have this be self-enforcing, I just don't think this design is gonna do it for the bike lane. Like, I know that it's hard, but I still think we can do better if we get rid of another traffic lane, just have two. And get rid of all the cars entirely. I think we can get a bike lane in there, because otherwise the bikes are just gonna go on the sidewalk. In the busy time, it'll be fine, because people can't bike on it. Or maybe, you know, we'll have what we used to have on the Brooklyn Bridge, where people are getting hit by bikes on the sidewalk. But I just don't think that this is gonna work for that. And then two, is that if construction is not gonna start until 2028, we did support the 2021 plan. And I think we should ask the DOT to take that off the shelf and implement it immediately. They said it would take 2 months when they presented in 2021, and that way we have something until 2028. The third thing is I personally think is my own hobby horse. If we're going to put $400 million into this, instead of just leveling out the street grid on the piazzas, we should do it for the entire avenue. That way it's much easier to make those street design changes in the future, because there's no curb and street, there's just one big chunk, which is what we have in, you know, you see in other cities, or we even have in New York, like Hudson Yards, for example. So I would prefer to have a resolution with those three items. And then we would also, in the whereas, list all the other comment we heard from members of the public. And
Yeah, I agree with Samir on this, and I also, Samir, you also referred earlier to a public presentation that you guys did at the CUNY Grad Center, and I would encourage you guys to do more, and I think we might want to include that in a resume. We want to give the public the opportunity to get further input and hear more about what your plans are.
so, I mean, I don't know if there are other comments, but I'm happy to make that motion to do what I just mentioned.
And I'll second.
Second. Okay. We get to a vote? Yep. Charlie, do you want Charlie or Charles?
So can you repeat once again?
Yeah. So the resolution.
We're not allowed to comment on this.
Yes, I will repeat it. The motion is to basically write a resolution that says we support the project. However, we would like to see a bike lane, even if that means taking out an additional vehicle lane. We would like to level out the entire street for the entire corridor, not just the piazza section, so it's curb to curb. We want to see more public comment, as Zul mentioned, similar to what we saw at the CUNY Grad Center. And that we also would like the DOT to take their 2021 plan off the shelf and implement it now, so we have some improvement until construction starts in 2028.
What about Samir? Hold on, yes.
Would you open to discussion? So obviously it makes sense what you're saying, the fact that we want an answer to the big question, not, I would like to, since we're gonna be drafting this anyways, to open up the solution space for how we're going to answer it, because for example, someone just mentioned that using Sixth Ave might be a valid resolution, just so that we can provide some options for how this could be viable. This could be one option, maybe Sixth Avenue, et cetera. If you're
Yeah,
okay
so
with that.
we can change it to, we would like to
Just like
see
address
a real solution. To
A
the
real
bike
solution
issue.
to the bike problem, so that we can avoid accidents, and
Yes.
real answer to that question.
Yep.
And then the last thing that I'll say is that, to your point, David, about a kind request to be involved in this process again at the later point in time when the RFP gets issued. I think that would be helpful to the resolution as well.
I'm sorry, to be involved when the RFP gets issued?
I think that's what that's.
Okay, next design.
Yeah, in the
Yeah,
next,
that's what
yeah.
we just discussed,
Yeah.
just to remind all of us that this is supposed to happen, I think it would be helpful to document that in writing for when we're supposed to have a conversation.
Restaurants, I mean, it was good that you brought them up. I think that we should probably also mention.
Oh, yeah, I
Restaurants.
guess.
Well, you should just pick up whatever was
Yeah,
on
trash
the,
Yeah, I
whatever was
can
on the
pick that
tape.
up. Do you want that as a result, or are you okay if that's in the whereas clause?
Yeah.
Or does it matter?
I don't really care. It's,
Yeah,
it's,
but-
I think resolved is probably stronger, so say resolved.
But in both cases, it should be considered rather than that we, because I don't know that we know the answer to this.
Sure. No, of course.
I can consider rest.
Consider restaurant, it's something we didn't see anything about.
Yeah, if you'll just summarize the, comments we have.
All right. Yeah.
Is that-
I was just gonna say, I was in Tokyo recently and the trash can thing's very important.
Yeah, although sometimes the answer is no trash
Yeah, that's
cans
that.
in order to avoid having trash.
That's what Samir's point about self-enforcement. I think that's the thing
Yeah.
for this resolution,
Yeah.
which is if we're relying on self-enforcement, let's try to get some clarity for how that's actually going to happen in all of these topics.
Well, the city does trash pick up now. Continue to.
Because the resolution changed the votes again, so Charles.
I'll vote in favor.
Okay, then. Alice,
Favor.
Ankur. I'm in favor, Christopher,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Tiffany, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, yes.
Okay, David,
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
And Brown, so,
Yes.
passes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 11-0-0. So,
Great,
Thank you.
thank
You
you.
have a hand for opportunity.
And we got done before the sunset.
all right,
Thanks, everybody, for coming in.
We appreciate your time.
should we close it and then go to the orientation?
Yeah, well, I think we're just gonna, hunt, yeah. Hey, Tiffany, you could just stay on the line. We're not gonna use the other, dial and we'll just have a quick discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you're okay with this continuing to be recorded?
Yeah.
Bye, thank you.
Still here, so not. Yes, you're about to pass.
And, we can, bump Isabel off the,
Little
call.
detail, we won't get out of here.
I just, there was a concern mentioned. Might as well put it.
Of course, of course.
Yeah. Address so that you guys don't have to.
Did right at the doors, you walk out, so if you look at. the-
Next time we come, we'll show you.
We'll most certainly ask them more than fast.
All right, just so the public knows, we're gonna go to like, I mean, if it's public, you can just leave them there.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind.
So I had circulated, there's two things, really. Welcome, to all the new members, and, so now you've seen what the session, this is pretty typical, I would say. We've been seeing like bigger, more complicated, issues. And, it's a great opportunity for us to kind of weigh in and go on the record with comments from committee members and the public. So I think this was like a pretty good example of what we've been doing lately. But I had circulated a kind of a working document that we had of all of the issues that we've raised over the last year or so since we were co-chairs of the committee. And I'm looking for people's feedback on two things, like, is there anything on there or anything that's not on there that you think should be added? And also, are there particular subjects that you're interested in participating in? So, we're not going to spend the time at 8:15 to go through that. Our next meeting's not till August. So it would be helpful if you can, take a look at this thing. Feel free to send us your comments. And again, if there's a particular topic that you'd be interested in spending time, or some collection of topics as we tried to do when we organized this, then let us know, because we're going to try and set the committee up to work that way, starting in the August meeting. And then I think we'll probably end up spending some time, since that's our next meeting, and we'll actually dive into, who's working on what and what topics we're going to prioritize and all of that. Yeah.
We have a quick question for the new members. Do you mind giving like a quick voice
Yeah.
of like what is the bare minimum, like, we all have our own passion projects, I'm sure that's why we're here.
Right.
What is the bare minimum that the committee needs to do, that is the fifth priority for why we're here? Are there a couple of like core initiatives that are going on all the time, and if so, what are those? If you have to pick one.
Yeah, I mean, we've been sort of trying to shift the way the committee focuses. We've been very reactive in the past, so DOT sends us something or some other agency sends us something. In a lot of cases, it was bus stop applications. So we were spending a lot of time on that. And what we're trying to do is, you know, as I mentioned, get into the process earlier. So we actually reached out to DOT and said, don't wait until the pie is totally baked. Like, come in and show us where you're heading so that we can provide input on that. They've been very good about that. You know, if there are topics that haven't been addressed, I added a few things on here that, like, I'm on the land use committee, and we did a whole review of Vanderbilt Avenue by you know, between 42nd and whatever the upper 47th. And so we said, shouldn't that ultimately just be a pedestrian street? You know, what are we really accomplishing by trying to run cars down a dead end one-way street? So I think there's opportunities for things like that to get processed now, like for us to be a little bit ahead of issues that we're interested in. I mean, the sort of the cutoff of like, should it be in front of the committee is like, is it really of district-wide importance? You know, but I don't think at this point, that's why I sent a working document. I mean, you should feel free to kind of dump whatever you want to on here. And then we'll take a look at it as a committee and, you know, kind of move people around to who's working on what, and then prioritize it. But
Would it, sorry.
Yeah, I would say that the bare minimum is the DOT will sometimes come and present something and they'll say, we would like your opinion, and we should give our opinion. That's like the bare minimum of what we should do. And then, yeah, we can go above and beyond. Like, for example, daylighting was having a moment in New York City. So we started a daylighting task force that Encore chaired and eventually wrote a resolution and saying, we want daylighting, here's what we want it to be. And so if there's something you're passionate about, definitely bring it up. We did that for 34th Street for a busway. We did that for 42nd Street for a busway.
right, I mean, 34th, and those are good examples because they came to us early. And we actually, with CB4 and CB6, just jumped on it and said, we support a busway. Like, they did not take a position in the early document. And we said, you know, we fully support a busway here. So it gave them direction that I don't think would have happened much later in the process otherwise, so.
If we're, sorry, this.
Yeah, keep going.
If we're trying to be a little bit more proactive with the committee, would it make sense for us, and I know that you might already be directly steering in this direction anyways, to set that strategic vision for the next year and figure out what do we want to focus on, not as individuals, but as a group? And what would be in scope versus out of scope? Because to your point, we probably don't want to spend a ton more time on bus applications, and also it would be really nice to have a legitimate, thank you.
Yeah.
I think it would be nice to have a legitimate reason to say no to certain proposals if we, you know, if we decide what matters most to us and decide that. Because, you know, we all have a finite amount of time, and I think that this might help us be a little bit more focused rather than just taking in what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think the goal is not to rule stuff out. I mean, we really have not spent a lot of time yet as a group kind of going through, even as we put this document together. I mean, this actually started with Samir and I kind of dumping stuff out and then putting it in front of the group. You know, it kind of the process I'm describing is what we did last year. And I think it worked pretty well. I mean, we don't presume to know, you know, what all the issues are. People are pretty well informed in pockets that we don't necessarily look at. So I guess if I'm understanding the question, I would say I would rather have kind of a dump, and then we'll sit here together, you know, in a session and say, you know, does this feel like it meets the test for district-wide importance, or doesn't it? And, you know, how do we want to allocate our time and prioritize these things? So I don't know, did that answer your?
Yes.
Okay.
So just to also address some of your questions, Christopher and I have taken a particular interest in Broadway Vision. That's a huge project. So we're hoping it will be task force, because it really was about all the city departments and agencies, all the bids and our district and stuff, but, and I think we very much welcome new members to join us in some of the conversations. Sure, of course.
That was an ad for Broadway, isn't it?
It was an ad for Broadway.
Yeah, but let's, you know, this thing was a mess because I wanted people to get a sense of what had been done on the table before. Some things, just the course of events took off the table. You know, other things we actually applied ourselves to. Some things have started to overlap with parks and public spaces, which now picked up our environmental piece. So there are probably examples in the Fifth Avenue presentation we saw that are probably better answered. Like, we don't deal with vendors, but they do. So, you know, if that question continues on, then we could probably bring parks and public space in, or these questions about activation. That's really what they do full time. So, you know, those are cases where we put it on the list and then we'll go out and figure out what the coordination is.
I'd like to add an item to the list and run an ad for it since we're already here. Which is some of the bus stops in our districts don't have that sign that the bus stops on 9th Avenue have that tells you when the next bus comes. And these things, they just have such bad predictability based on Google Map info. And if they figured out a way to put that sign up on the bus stops on 9th Avenue, there should be a way for our district bus stops to have that. So I'll think of a more succinct way to word.
Yeah, that's fine.
But
And again, this is a case where, you know, we kind of assemble these things and then we have a contact. I think she was, I don't know if she's still on the call, but Colleen at the DOT is the official rep to CB5. So we kind of collect these types of questions and issues and work with her to get answers for them. And a lot of times, you know, like in your example, we may see something pop up in part of the city because they're still working the kinks out before they roll it out in other places.
Would trains also be a current question?
What's that?
Would trains also be a?
Yeah. I mean, I guess you had raised the question about Penn Station, right? So, you know, I've been our rep, the board's rep on the Penn Station, whatever it's called, working advisory group or something. But you know, with everything that's been going on with the current administration, that's been suspended. So I think it's a great topic, and it's been on the list for a long time because we didn't figure out how to take information coming out of the PennSWAG meetings and get them in front of the committee and then to the board. But then it turns out there was nothing to act on anyway, and now it's not clear what the timeline is for that, or, you know, but yeah, absolutely, this committee will be, you know, reviewing all of that.
I think two other topics we could add, jumping on the bus thing is one, I don't know if people know this, but you're actually not supposed to have strollers open on buses except on certain pilot routes. I
Or
think.
the train. Right.
Or on the train.
You're not supposed to have strollers on the train, no.
All right, well, maybe we
They're
could
supposed to be
do a
closed.
little,
Or two, so.
I don't know, some sort of like baby task force. And then two was similar to that, a lot of buses don't fully pull up to the curb for loading and unloading. Trying to maybe figure out some ideas for how to fix that, because it is a huge problem.
And they just dropped in our lap, why are so many of those express buses empty?
Sorry.
The bus,
Yeah,
there's complaints,
Yeah.
those buses were empty, like, we should know something about their capacity, and if they're gonna parade them through our neighborhood, then.
Yeah, I
You
think
know,
we
why-
heard
like-
some of this earlier on in this process, which is, you know, look at the map. Fifth Avenue runs forever. And if you want to mainline a bunch of buses, you know, to get to Midtown Manhattan or lower, that's a great place to do it. So I think they've been using the fanciest avenue in Manhattan as the, you know, as the way to pump buses downtown.
And those are largely interborough buses, and so one of the things that we're hoping with congestion relief, let's not call it congestion pricing, is that we will get more people out of their cars and onto those buses. But also, you know, that they will, you know, look at their findings and see if they consolidate routes, illuminate routes, really figure out what they're doing with all these express buses, if they're only running at 10% capacity and slowing everything else down.
We should have asked for a tram.
Well,
We really wasted our time.
the stroller on buses thing, the pilot, they haven't really,
They're still in pilot.
yeah.
So, you know.
We
can
did
talk-
ask for tram on 42nd Street.
Yeah, that was a
That sounds
utility
great.
mess.
Yeah.
So,
Could give out free baby slings.
yeah.
Solve the problem.
Yeah.
Well, also on the bus stop signs that show the time, like the arrival times.
Yeah.
How do they? Like, where did they get those times from?
I
What
think it's
time-
Wi-Fi or something.
Oh, okay.
Of the system.
Cause like they're not accurate.
No, but I mean, if you've seen like the new subway timing, I have the app and you'll sit there and you'll see that the app and the subway sign don't have the same time.
Oh.
So I think these systems are just so complicated and,
I see.
you know, separated in pieces that they.
There are
that's
three
sort of-
ways they do it, if they do it at all. Some of these signs, which are out of order more and more often. Others at particular spots, you know, you text 511, that is, and you give that bus stop number and you get that information. Others, you have to give the route and the intersection, and then they get back to what direction you're going. So, yeah.
But the buses themselves have, you know,
Equivalent,
yeah.
walk on.
Well, Wi-Fi, sorry, I'm gonna
Yeah.
say the other thing, I'm a transplant from. It's absurd that New York City has no cellular on trains. in 2025. I'm sorry.
They have a plan.
Can we get involved with this plan and
Sure.
make comments and figure out why is it so slow?
Sure.
Because
Species of village, international village, they are huge.
And the metro is really more of a suburban railway.
Yeah,
than it is a
that's
subway
much
system.
far now. It means it's
But-
close to night.
sports, you know?
Yeah. You know, there was an anti-cell phone movement here for a long time that impacted that.
It really
Um,
does just encourage you to look at your fellow passengers, and see what crazy
Yeah,
things they're doing.
No, I think it's.
They're trying to reduce violence on the subways.
Well, then we would.
Yeah, I know,
I think it was
taking
me.
things away from people might not be the best way to do that.
Yeah, so I mean, think about it. Send us an email and we'll, or I can send the link out for this document and, you know, you can just add it directly. Okay.
Can I just ask what other committees the new members are on?
Can I close the meeting or is that?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Great. All right, then this meeting is adjourned. Now we can just hang out and chat, or people can go.
Okay.
Which have yet to.